On tonight just how big our God is. But God asked Job a question here in Job about the constellations. He brings in more than what I'm going to talk about. But in Job 38 and 31, he asked Job a question here. He said, "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion?" And he's talking about the constellations. There, two of them. And one of them, they're real interesting. I don't know much about these, but one of them, which is Pleiades, he asked him, he said, we'll go back and make sure I get this right. Can you bind the sweet influences of Pleiades? And that constellation, they found out, JD, is constantly, over time, separating. It's spreading apart. The scientists can probably tell you what's spreading it apart, but they don't know what causes whatever it is they say spreading it apart to make it spread apart. And then Keith, he said, or can you loose the bands of Orion? That Orion's belt is what we call it. And it's together. It's held together. It never moves or very much at all, Jeff. It's like it's banded. That constellation is banded together. The other one's loose and apart. It goes so much every so many years. It goes apart. We probably can't even see it with the naked eye, Bobby. But if you would have looked at a picture of it 2,000 years ago and then look at it a picture today, you probably could tell that it has moved just a little bit. But he asked him, he said, can you loose the bands of Orion? It's banded together. Bobby, something's causing that to come together. And like I said, they can probably give you their opinion on what it is, but they don't know how it does it. It's just like the Earth and the planets going around the sun, revolving. We know it does it, Rick, but they don't know really what causes it. Got all these scientific terms out there, but they don't know what causes it. But guess what? God does. God could actually band that Pleiades together if he wanted to. He could loose that belt of Orion if he wanted to. One of these constellations, I preached this years ago and brought these other two in, but one of these constellations, Bobby, it just goes everywhere. God just lets it go everywhere. And then another one's, they call it like the bear. It's got its own little, like suns that follows it. God created all this in the sky, and he's in control of all of it today. He controls where they go, how fast they go, how they move in the sky today. And our God controls everything that's happening, Rick, in the earth and in the space. We know today that if the wind blows, it's because God allowed it to blow. You can keep reading here in Job, and it might be back in the earlier chapters, but he asked him another question about lightning. Basically, and this is my own words now, but can you control the lightning? Can you throw it? God's saying, I can. He's in control of the thunderstorms that come. Me and Barbara was talking about the snow coming earlier. We don't know if it's coming or not. They say it could come, it might come. God knows if it's coming. He's in control of all these things. And Bobby, we've got problems in our life. But if we actually compare our problems to what God can do today, is there anything impossible for God? Is there anything going on in my life, your life, or anybody that you know's life tonight that God doesn't know all about it? I don't know if God's really interested. Jesus said there wasn't a sparrow hit the ground that God didn't know about. Wasn't one of them would die that God didn't know about. And Jesus went on to say in another place, you're of more value than many sparrows. You're created in God's image. These birds and animal kingdom keep, God created them for our benefit. And we forget that a lot of times, especially all these type we should be eating lettuce types. And not, I don't want to go down that road, but today, and there's nothing wrong with lettuce if you like it, I guess. I can't eat it without that junk they pour all over it. But that makes it good for you. But Rick, God created all this animal kingdom. It was all for our benefit. Some of it's for food. Some of it's for work. Some of it, I think, is just so you take a little kitty cat, and there is something, even though I really don't like cats, there is something about them. You put it on your lap, and it just purrs like that, and it kind of calms you down. God gave man and women these things for our benefit. Everything out in the world today, the trees today, I don't think they're just out there just because they're pretty. I think they're there for our benefit. Now, I know science would tell you that we need the trees because of oxygen. Maybe that's the reason. But I think God's big enough, Jeff, to create oxygen without trees. I just think He can, if that's what He wants to do. But He designed everything that way, and He's in control of all these things, Bobby. And then we look at the Scriptures, just how big our God is today. And we know that why God is out here having this tree to grow. How does He do that? Remember Zacchaeus climbed up in that tree just to see Jesus? I'm a firm believer that 1,000 years before Zacchaeus was born, 1,000 years before the story Jesus was going to walk by Jericho that day, I think God blew His wind and blew a seed into a crack in the ground to have that tree grow up right there. So a little old short fellow called Zacchaeus could climb that tree that day to see Jesus. God was in control of that, in control of all the animal kingdom, in control of everything that's happening in space out there today, everything that's going on in heaven, all the governments of the world. God is in control of it. We don't think of that. I know you might not like Trump, you might not like Biden, we might not like the ruler of this kingdom here, and God may not, they may not be godly people, don't get me wrong, but guess what? God put them in power. He puts kings in power, and He takes them out of power when He's done with them. And we're going to find out here in a minute how big God is. If the Lord will help me tonight, He put one in that really wasn't a godly man, Brother Bobby, but He put him in because he had a purpose for his life. And Trump, I believe he's in the White House right now because God's got a purpose for his life. I don't know any other world leaders. Forgive me, I don't keep up none of this stuff. I know what that heathen over in North Korea, I know what he looks like. I'm like, who in the world would ever put him in office? That'd be a crazy person today. But Rick, God put him there for a reason and for a purpose. And Bobby, we think about it. He's controlling all this. All the world powers, all of them are under His control today. All of nature's under God's control. All the scientific community we mentioned this morning and the inventions that we come up with here on earth. God's putting thoughts into men and women's minds to create all these things. And Bobby, God's just not too big that He can't see that little sparrow hit the ground that we might not even know about. Rick, it may hit the ground and rot. Bones go back to the dust, and not a human being even knew that it happened. But God saw it, and God took care of it its whole life. Fed it, even though it doesn't gather up in barns like we do, like Jesus said. It doesn't reap, it doesn't sow, but Jesus said our Heavenly Father takes care of that little teeny tiny bird. And then Josh, He's controlling all these great big things. And what are you preaching about tonight? We worry about our problems, our lives today. I mean, there's nothing wrong to worry. Don't get me wrong in a certain sense. But we not just worry, but we get overwhelmed with all these things. And we let them overwhelm us, and we forget that, Josh, nothing is happening in my life or your life or anyone else's life that God doesn't know all about it, Bobby. And he's up there saying, man, I wish my people would trust me. I wish they'd believe in me. I wish they'd know that I'm in control of all things in heaven and in earth. Whether they be things we just read, invisible. Do you really believe in all that? Yes, sir. There's a battle going on out there every day that you and I don't even see. Today between the forces of God's angels and Satan and his angels. It's going on, Bobby. Every day Satan's trying to get God to drop down his fence around his church, around his people. Satan, praise God. We're going to have to do a study on one of these days. We think the Antichrist, man, he's just going to show up on the scene. I think he's been here for a long time. Bobby, I think he's been here for a long time. You can see world leaders raise up that you'd almost think that's got to be him. That's got to be him. I think Satan was trying to raise that guy up, and God said, nope, it ain't time, buddy. It's not him. Set him down. Can you see some of them? You can see it in Hitler. You can see it in Stalin. You can see it in that one from Germany. You can see it in all kinds of world leaders where I believe the devil has tried to raise up and put his influence in the world. And God stepped in and said, nope, that ain't going to happen that way. I'm in control of all things today. But Rick, God raised up, I wrote a few down here, God raised up a king one time and named him by name hundreds of years before he was ever born. Israel was getting so wicked. And their king at that time was worshiping idol gods and offering up sacrifice to idols. And God sent an old prophet. I preached on him a while back, but not this part. God sent an old prophet into the land. It just calls him an old prophet. Into the land. And he preached just to the altar, Bobby. Didn't preach to nobody else. The Bible says he preached to the altar. And told them that God was going to raise up a king and call him Josiah by name. He's going to offer up the priests, the false priests on the altar as a sacrifice to God and burn their very bones. And hundreds of years later, God had this king raise up named Josiah that brought God right back into the nation of Israel, took all the idol worshiping priests and offered them up on God's idol as a sacrifice to God. Hundreds of years in advance, God said this is going to take place. Bobby, God knows the beginning today. God knows the ending from the beginning, according to the Bible. Does God know what's going to happen? Keith just read something out of Revelations. Was you reading about the crystal clear river? I can't remember, bro. Sorry. Today I'll remember when I'm done here in a minute. But if you can read about that crystal clear river that's flowing from the throne of God today, God was showing us something that was going to happen in the future today. Do you think it's already created? Yeah, I think it's there today. But God was showing us the future. We're going to see that. We're going to see that new Jerusalem that God's got going to come down from God out of heaven. It's going to be a city, Bobby, that's going to have walls made of jasper and pearl. It'll have 12 gates, Brother Keith, into that city. It's a real city. Abraham even knew about it. He said, I'm looking for a city that's got foundations, whose builder and maker's not United States, it's not China, it's not Russia. The builder and maker is God. God's got a city waiting out there, Bobby. Today, God's in control of everything we're talking about tonight. And the last breath you took, He gave it to you.
Yeah.
Last thought you had, God allowed you to have it.
Yeah.
He's in control of every minute detail. Rick, we think about the heart. And I don't know, these medical people may know more about this stuff than I do, but I'll give you simple terms. of country boy terms, so to speak. We say the heart's just a pump, Bobby. All it does is pump blood. Well, what causes it to pump? Well, the brain up here works, and it fires this, and it sends a signal to the heart, and it sends signals to your fingers and makes them move. They just do it. It's like it's natural. Your brain's telling it to it. What tells the brain to do it? I don't know. I don't think anybody else knows. Rick, but we know this works this, and this works this, but what makes all of it work together? Only God knows. I think there's a God factor out there somewhere in the world, don't you? I think there's one little element, one little atom out there that God has that's keeping everything held together today. Science is trying to find it. They're trying to find it. And Rick, I think they call it the God element or the God factor or something still along those scientific terms. They really don't know what it is, but it's there holding everything together. Where's it at? John said it. Colossians said it. All things were by Him and for Him, and all things are under His control. His preeminence. He's holding everything together. And He rose up Josiah. Yeah. He rose up a foreign king one time. Israel got thrown into captivity for 70 years, and the temple got destroyed, and the children of God, they were wanting to go back home and rebuild that temple, and Bobby, God raised up a king hundreds of years before this nation was even in power, before they were even together as a nation. Media and Persia came together at one time and formed one nation. Rick, they were two nations. Before that ever happened, God said, I'm going to raise up a king, a servant, and call his name Cyrus, and he is going to rebuild my temple. Cyrus didn't go rebuild the temple. He gave him permission to go rebuild the temple. God raised him up just to take care of his children's problem, Bobby. And hundreds of years before it ever took place, God let him know it was going to happen and named him by name. Our God's big. Amen. He knows what we're facing. He knows what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next year. God knows. He's in control. It's not going to, a lot of people bruise, this happened and that happened. The last decade, to be honest with you, I'm like, wherever it goes, you know, it might not be my way or Bobby, but whatever happens, I'm confirmed believer that God's in control. Right? He's going to lead us where He wants us to go. He's going to control our steps if He wants to. He said He would if we trust Him tonight. So we don't need to worry when God's in control. But look at Elijah. You guys remember how many miracles Elijah done? I think he did 7, if I'm not mistaken. Elijah, the great prophet of God. Bob, he did 7 great miracles. One of them was raising someone back from the dead. He called fire down from heaven one time. He stopped the rain, according to the Bible, through a prayer. He caused it to rain again through a prayer. And the Bible said he had a little servant named Elisha that followed him around. And Elisha kept telling him, man, you stay here because I got to go. After he told him, God's going to take me out of here. Right. People kept saying, God's going to take your master away from you. And Elisha knew that Elijah, he was going to go and leave. God was going to take him. He said, so wherever you go, I'm going. I ain't leaving your side. Right. And then they got ready to go into, I believe it was Jericho, I could be mistaken, got ready to go over there. And he said, I'm not going to leave your side. And he said, well, what can I do for you? And he said, I want a double portion. Yep. Of your power, your strength with God. He said, man, that's a hard thing. He said, but if you see me taken out of here, God will grant it. And this is how big God is, Josh. Nothing goes without God noticing it. You trace Elijah's life. Now, you got a double portion in the Bible saying the great prophet of God. But on his deathbed, you're going to find out he only did 13 miracles. That ain't a double portion, is it? What do you think of that, sir? Oh, did 13. Died. Well, where's that double portion at? God leaves nothing by chance. Right. He knows exactly what he was doing. I don't know how long it was, Keith, but it was long enough.
Yeah.
After Elijah had done died, the breath of life had done left his body.
Yeah.
It was long enough that his skin had left his body. All that was left was bones, and he was laying in a cave, Rick, and along comes a war, and one of the soldiers fell over dead, and they didn't have time to bury him. So they said, we'll just throw him over in that cave. I don't think they actually knew where they were at the time. They were in a war. They probably wasn't paying no attention. They said, we'll just throw him in here. Threw him in a cave, and his bones touched, or his body touched the bones of Elisha. He came back alive. Number 14. Miracle just took place. God is in control of everything that goes on. Every little small, minute detail. He made sure that the promise that his prophet made to Elisha came true.